Hey guys, it's me, it's Pastor Marcus Kelly over here at Bethel Baptist Church in Townsend, Tennessee, and I hope you're having a wonderful Memorial Day. You know, Memorial Day is an extremely important time for all of us as Americans as we stop and we remember those who paid the ultimate sacrifice for us, and so that we could be free, that we could remain a free people. And there's this one article that kind of circulates around this time of year. It's taken from a speech by Marine General John Kelly. And he's talking about these two Marines that paid that ultimate price. And for me, I want to share this with you. I want to read this part of this speech to you because this epitomizes to me personally so many men and women in our armed forces and the sacrifice that they have made. So let me read part of this for you. Two Marines, Corporal Jonathan Yell and Lance Corporal Jordan Harder, 22 and 20 years old respectively. Now this is from General John Kelly's speech. He says, one from each battalion were assuming to watch together at the entrance gate of an outpost that contained a makeshift barracks housing 50 Marines. The same broken down, ramshackle building was also home to 100 Iraqi police. Also, my men and our allies in the fight against the terrorists in Ramadi, a city until then the most dangerous city on earth and owned by Al-Qaeda. Yale was a dirt poor mixed race kid from Virginia with a wife and daughter and a mother and a sister who were all supported by him. He did this on a yearly salary of less than $23,000. Harder, on the other hand, was a middle-class white kid from Long Island. They were from two completely different worlds. Had they not joined the Marines, they never would have met each other or understood the multiple Americas existing simultaneously, depending on one's race and education level and economic status and where you might or might not have been born. But they were Marines, and they were combat Marines forged in the same crucible of Marine training. And because of this bond, they were brothers as close or closer than if they were born of the same woman. The mission orders they received from the sergeant squad leader, I'm sure, went something like this. Okay, you two clowns, stand this post and let no unauthorized personnel or vehicle pass. Got it? And then the general says, well, I'm sure that Yell and Harder kind of rolled their eyes and said in unison, yes, Sergeant, with just enough attitude to make the point that, no kidding, sweetheart, we're not rookies, we're not new here. They then relieved the two other Marines on watch and took up their post at the entry control point of Joint Security Station Nasser in the Sophia section of Ramadi, Al-Anbar, in Iraq. A few minutes later, a large blue truck turned down the alleyway, perhaps 60 or 70 yards in length, and sped its way through the serpentine of concrete Jersey walls. The truck stopped just short of where the two were posted and detonated, killing them both catastrophically. 24 brick masonry houses were damaged or destroyed. A mosque 100 yards away completely collapsed. The truck's engine came to rest 200 yards away, knocking most of the houses down flat before it stopped. Our explosive experts reckon the blast was made of 2,000 pounds of explosives. Two died, and because of these two young infantrymen, that they didn't have it in their DNA to turn and run from danger, they saved 150 of their Iraqi and American brothers in arms. The general goes on to say, when I read the situation report about the incident a few hours after it happened, I called the regimental commander for details, as something about this struck me as different. Marines dying or being seriously wounded is commonplace in combat. We expect Marines, regardless of rank or MOS, to stand their ground and do their duty, even if they die in the process, if that's what the mission takes. But this just seemed different. The regimental commander had just returned from the site and he agreed, but reported there were no American witnesses to the event, just Iraqi police. I figured if there was any chance of finding out what actually happened and then to decorate the two Marines to acknowledge their bravery, I'd have to do it just as a combat award that required two eyewitnesses. And we figured the bureaucrats back in Washington would never buy Iraqi statements. If it had any chance at all, it had to come under the signature of a general officer. So I traveled to Ramadi the next day and spoke individually to a half a dozen Iraqi police, all of whom told the exact same story. The blue truck turned down into the alley and immediately sped up as it made its way through the serpentine. They all said this. Listen to what they said. We knew immediately what was going on as soon as the two Marines began firing. The Iraqi police then related that some of them also fired, and then to a man, every single one of them ran for safety just prior to the explosion. All survived. Many were injured. Some were injured very seriously. One of the Iraqis elaborated with tears welling up in his eyes. He said this: they'd run like any normal man would to save his life. What he didn't know until then, he said, and what he learned that very instant, was that Marines aren't normal. Choking past the emotion, he said, "Sir, in the name of Allah, no sane man would have stood there and did what they did. They saved us all." Now, while we didn't know at the time, the general goes on to say, and only learned a couple of days later after I wrote the summary and submitted yelling harder for Navy crosses, was that one of our security cameras, damaged initially in the blast, recorded some of the suicide attack. It happened exactly as the Iraqis had described it. It took exactly 6 seconds from when the truck entered the alley until it detonated. You can watch the last 6 seconds of their young lives, putting myself in their heads. I suppose it took about a second for the two Marines to separately come to the same conclusion about what was going on once the truck came into their view at the far end of the alley. Exactly no time to talk it over, to call the sergeant and ask what they should do. Only enough time to take half an instant and think about what the sergeant told them to do only a few minutes before. Let no unauthorized personnel or vehicle pass. The two Marines had about 5 seconds left to live. It took maybe 2 seconds for them to present their weapons, take aim, and open up. By this time, the truck was halfway through the barriers and gaining speed all the time. Here, the recording shows a number of Iraqi police, some of whom fired their AKs, now scattering like the normal and rational men they were, some running right past the Marines. They had 3 seconds left to live. For about 2 seconds more, the recording shows the Marines' weapons firing nonstop, the truck's windshield exploding into shards of glass as their rounds take it apart and tore into the body of the man who was trying to get past them to kill their brothers. Americans and Iraqi bedded down in the barracks, totally unaware of the fact that their lives at that moment depended entirely on two Marines standing their ground. If they had been aware, they would have known that they were safe, because two Marines stood between them and a crazed suicide bomber. The recording shows the truck careening to a stop immediately in front of the two Marines. And all of the instantaneous violence, yelling harder, never hesitated. By all reports and by the recording, they never stepped back. They never even started to step aside. They never even shifted their weight. With their feet spread shoulder width apart, they leaned in to the danger, firing as fast as they could work their weapons. They only had 1 second left to live. Then the truck explodes. The camera goes blank. Two young men go to their God. 6 seconds. The general closes with this: not enough time to think about their families, their countries, their flag, or about their lives or their deaths, but more than enough time for two very brave young men to do their duty into eternity. That is the kind of people who are on watch all over the world tonight for you. And it is those kind of young men that we want to honor and recognize on this Memorial Day. I hope that you're having a wonderful Memorial Day, but please take a moment to pause and to remember those who paid the ultimate price for our freedoms. God bless you.